Hi, this is just a quick one on how to get a bit of extra performance out of your TRX-4 without having to buy any parts. So yes, I've changed the electrics and everything, and this does really apply to like the Blazer, the Bronco, the G500. You could probably do some of this on your Sport and maybe on the Defender. I'm just looking at the shell to try and work out if there's anything you can do. So a couple of really simple mods, and it kind of depends on which version you've got. So if you have the Blazer, the Bronco or the G500, or if you've bought a Sport kit that has the inner fenders, then you have shock mounts that can change. And what I do is I take advantage of something that's called, well, people call it the alpha effect. Essentially it's the alpha angle. And I lay down my shocks and put them in the front hole. What that does is has the negative effect of making the spring softer, but actually helps lower the truck, and that's a positive. As well, it gives you more articulation on the rear, because by moving the shock forwards, when that link extends, you get a bit of extra articulation. I then, to compensate for the fact that the shocks are now softer on the rear, is just unwind the ones at the front so they're the super softest, so it kind of remains level. I was running a battery in the front, a little 2,500 milliamp jobby, but being winter, I mean, breath's kicking out here, it is very cold in here. Being winter, I don't want to change my batteries too much, so I bought some 5,000 milliamp batteries and I run them in the centre battery tray. And I will show you that in a minute, because those big batteries are big and heavy and we want the weight as low as possible. With the front battery, it does help put some weight on the front to get some traction, but it also puts that weight quite high up. So I found that actually having a much lower battery in the middle tends to give you a better effect. I have put some brass on this, and that's because I'm running those big fat 5,000 milliamp batteries and it had just shifted the weight a bit too far back. When I go back to running my normal 2,000 milliamp batteries, where I'm not going to be freezing my hands changing them all the time, they do last about an hour with the brushless system, which isn't too bad. But when I go back to the bigger batteries, I'll take the brass off. But essentially, if you're putting a 500 gram battery in the middle of your truck, you probably want to put something up front to compensate for the fact that all the weight's at the back. So that's shocks, that's batteries talked about. The smaller the battery the better, because it's lighter. It just means you have to change them a lot more, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. Some other mods that people don't think about is actually dropping the body posts. The stock shell sits on the body posts perfectly, but then the sides pop out a lot and the shell's, well, stock height. What I've actually done is lowered my body posts, front and rear, by about 10 mil, and then just cut a small amount off this part of the shell and just notched this bit slightly. And in fact the shell bows slightly anyway, and that means that all of this weight along the top, including this big heavy thing, drops by 10 mil. And the shell actually weighs 350 grams. So if you can get roughly half of that lower, that's always a good thing. And it's essentially an invisible mod, and it generally stops the sides from kicking out on the G500 when you roll it over. If you have the G500 doing that mod, you will need to remove the rear bumper, but since the rails are nice tough steel, probably not going to affect you too much anyway. What else have I done? The other thing I've done is modify the shocks slightly. That's not so easy, and that's probably a separate video, but I've essentially added an extra 2 mil of travel to the front and the rear shocks. If you're finding that your crawler's tipping back too much, you can do a pen spring mod to bring that front back down, but because I'd got my weight balance about right for where I wanted it to be, it's about 56% to the front. The truck's nice and balanced for a heavy truck. You know, it's about 3.8 kilos at its highest. Yeah. So the other thing, yeah, G500 specific. Those exhaust pipes, they're somewhere. I've like chucked them in a box somewhere. But those exhaust pipes, they hang up a lot. So take those off if you find that when you're crawling, not necessarily when you're trailing and doing scale stuff, but when you're crawling and you're hanging up, just take those off. And then the other one is one that's actually on the Traxxas website for the sport, is to put a couple of washers underneath the front bolt of the slider. Now Traxxas recommends that you put washers under both, but I actually put some washers. I've got some 4mm washers in the front two bolts, and that makes your sliders more of a V. So it lifts the main bar of the slider up, but then they're slightly angled as well. So then when the body's going over a rock, you haven't got the full contact area of the slider, you've just got that bottom corner, which is really useful. So yeah, as for the battery tray, I'm not sure how well the camera's going to pick this up, and I'll be going through what I've done to the battery tray on the next video, which is about putting the G500 on some new rails. But essentially, not sure how well that's going to pick up. What I've done is, hopefully I've got a battery tray lying around somewhere. I haven't. Essentially, I've cut all of the centre of the battery tray out, apart from a little tab at the end. And I will go through this in the other video, so that the battery, instead of, grab a battery, instead of the battery lying like that in the tray, it's like that. And to support the battery, because this is a wide battery that's actually as wide as the battery tray, I've just got a velcro strap that goes all the way around, front to back, and that holds it in place. Took this to a place called Cow and Calf in Yorkshire. It's lots of rocks, lots of trail, huge uphills. Some of the uphills take you 45-50 minutes to walk up, more or less depending on how fit you are. It was freezing cold, so we were going quick enough to stay warm, but not too quick that we got all sweaty in our gear. And it didn't fall out once, and the truck did fall over a lot, because with ice and rock we're having lots of fun, and because I'm mad, I've got all of the turbo timing in the fastest axe I can put in there and just have it running as fast as possible. So yeah, so all of the mods were all focused on either increasing rear articulation. I'm not a fan of front articulation so much, because there's some situations where on these rails that will cause problems. When you're going up a steep hill, the front can lift so far that it then pulls, or it transfers all the weight to the rear. But on the back, the more articulation the better, because as you go over stuff, as you're starting to get the belly over things, having the rear wheels still having some friction to push them forwards really helps. It means if you do hang up the belly, you've usually got enough grip to just pull it back an inch and then just push over. Yeah, and then getting the truck, getting the weight low, getting the truck low. So yeah, have a play around with your body posts. I literally only took about 2mm off the shell and about 3 or 4mm to notch it, and then the sides kind of bend a little bit and actually holds them in better. Take off anything that you don't need. In my case, I liked the exhausts, but they came off. With all the Cow and Calf stuff, the shell has got broken and the lights have fallen out, so they need to go back in at some point. But yeah, just because the weight's up front doesn't mean it's good weight. Try and keep that weight as low as possible. Get it as low in the truck as possible, because it would be much better to have a 50-50 weight balance, but all the weight is as low as you can, than to have a 60-40, but all the weight's really high up on the truck, because as soon as that suspension unloads, you're off. Whereas with the lower weight, there's less chance of the weight transfer happening so early. Yeah, and you end up with a more balanced truck. That's that. I hope I didn't ramble too much. Let me know in the comments if you can think of anything else that you could do. And I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching.